Okay. So yesterday we stopped at Prabhupada's Leela Amrita chapter 31. Hundreds of devotees straining to see and hear Prabhupada's response followed him as he went downstairs, although the crowd surrounded him. He remained relaxed and unhurried. He entered the press room at a long hall directly beneath the temple room. A large old offset press, a paper cutter, a folder, and flats of paper stock filled the room, which smelled like a print shop. Advaita, the press manager, bowed down in his green khakis before Prabhupada. He rose up smiling, and Prabhupada stepped forward and embraced him, putting his arm around Advaita's head. Very good, he said. Standing before the printing press, Prabhupada folded his arm together and offered a prayer to his spiritual master. Jai Om Vishnupadaya Paramhansa Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Advaita asked Prabhupada to give the press a transcendental name, ISKCON Press. Prabhupada said, matter of factly, as if it had already been named. Keep all the machines very clean, Prabhupada said, and they will last a long time. This is the heart of ISKCON. You are the heart of ISKCON, Prabhupada, a devotee said. And this is my heart, said Prabhupada. Leaving the main press room, Prabhupada toured the other press facilities, squeezing in, ducking under, standing on tiptoe. The crowd of devotees followed him step by step. He peeked into a little kubli hole where a devotee was composing type. The typesetters, he said, should proceed very slowly at first, and in that way they would become expert. Turning to Advaita, he said, everyone in India who speaks Hindi has a Gita press publication. So everyone who speaks English should have an ISKCON press publications. Compared to most authors, Prabhupada's literacy contribution was already substantial. But he wasn't just an author. His mission was to flood the world with literature glorifying Lord Krishna. Prabhupada's ISKCON was now 3 years old, yet his disciples were only beginning to execute his plans for printing and distributing transcendental literature. Printing was an important step, the first step. Months ago, Prabhupada had written, the press must work on continuously and we shall produce immense volumes of literature. If the press goes on nicely, I shall be able to give you material for publishing a book every 2 months. We have got so much material for the Krishna consciousness movement. And just prior to coming to Boston, he had written, some kirtan and distributing back to Godhead and our other literatures in the fieldwork of this movement. Temple worship is secondary. Now, ISKCON was printing 50,000 copies of Back to Godhead per month, and Prabhupada hoped to increase the sales more and more. Standing in the crowded, chilly basement, surrounded by devotees, press machines, and transcendental literature, Prabhupada described how he wanted ISKCON Press to operate. He said that after dictating a tape, he would mail it to Boston to be transcribed. The transcription should take no more than 2 days. During the next 2 days, someone would edit the transcribed manuscript. Then author-editor would take 2 days to edit the transcript a second time. A Sanskrit editor would add the diacritical markings and the manuscript would be ready for composing. Prabhupada said he could produce 50 tapes, 300 manuscripts pages every month. At that rate, ISKCON Press should produce a book every 2 months or 6 books in a year. Prabhupada wanted to print at least 60 books. Therefore, his press workers would have plenty to do for the next 10 years. If the devotees simply printed his books incessantly, he said, Even if they had to work 24 hours a day in shift, it would give him great delight. He was ready, if necessary, to drop all his activities except for publishing books. This was the special nectar the press devotees were hankering to hear. Printing books was Prabhupada's heart. It was the thing most dear to him. During Prabhupada's week in Boston, Purushottama continued as secretary and servant. Out of duty, his difficulties in London had increased. Doubtful and morose, he came before Prabhupada 2 days before their departure. I will stop there. We'll continue there.
That's fine, Mataji.
Okay,
Hare
thank you.
Krishna.
We'll start with today's verse, which is from Canto 5, Chapter 8, verse number 19. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudiriyat Nashtaprayesa Bhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Nashthiki. I don't know how I'm going to say this verse, but I will try. I'm sure all of you can do better than me, but I'll give it a go first. Aho batayam harina kunaka kripna ishwara ratha charana paribramana raina swagana shurda bandhu bhayah परिवर्जितः शरणं च मोपाशिदो मामेव माता पितारौ भृत्रज्ञातिं यौतिकांश्चैवोपेयाय नान्यं कञ्चन वेदामय अतिविश्राब्धश्चाता एव माया मत्परायानास्या पोषणपालना प्रीणानलालनम् अनुसूयूनानुष्ठेयं सरण्योपेक्षदोषा विदुषा अहो बतायां हरिणा कुनका कृपणा ईश्वरा रथचरणा परिभ्रमणा रायेण स्वगणा श्रुहद् बन्धुभय परिव्रजितः शरणं च मोपासादितो मामेव माता पितारौ ज्ञातिन् यौतिकांश्चैवोपेयाय नान्यं कञ्चन वेदमय अतिविश्राब्धश्चाता एव माया मत्परायानस्य पोषणपालना प्रीणानलालनम् अनुसूयानानुष्ठेयं सरण्योपेक्षा दोषा vidusha. Anybody would like to recite this verse?
Hare Krishna Mataji, I am trying.
Yes, Prabhu.
অহোবতায়ম হরিণ কুনকঃ কৃপণ ঈশ্বর রথ চরণ পরিভ্রমণ রয়েন সগন সুহৃদ বন্ধভ্য পরিবর্জিতঃ শরণং চ মোপসাদিত মমেব মাতা পিতরৌ ভ্রাতৃজ্ঞাতেন যৌথিকাংশ চৌগোপ্যায় নান্যং কঞ্চন বেদময়ী অতি বিশ্রব্দস চাত এব মায়া মৎপরায়ণস্য পোষণ পালন প্রীণন লালনম অনুসূয়ানুষ্ঠেয়ম শরণ্যপেক্ষা দোষ বিদুষা। হরে কৃষ্ণ।
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
Hi, Krishna.
Aho batayam হরিণকুনকः কৃপণ ঈশ্বর রথচরণ পরিভ্রমণ রয়েন স্বগণ সুহৃদ বন্ধুভ্য পরিবর্জিতः শরণং চ মোপসাদিত মামেব মাতা পিতরৌ ভ্রাতৃজ্ঞাতিন যৌথিকাংশ্চৈব পেয়ায় নান্যং কঞ্চত বেদময়্যতি বিশ্রব্ধশ্চাত एवमया मत्परायणस्य पोषणलालन प्रीणन लालनम् अनुसूयुनानुष्ठेयं शरण्योपेक्षा दोषविदुषा. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Adani.
Hare Krishna Mataji, I am also trying.
Yes, Mataji.
Thank you. अहो बतायं हरिणा कुनकः कृपण ঈশ্বর রথ চরণ পরিভ্রমণ রয়ন সগণ সুহৃদ বন্ধুভ পরিবর্জিতः শরণং চ মোপসাদিতু মামেব মাতা পিতরৌ ভ্রাতৃজ্ঞাতিন যৌথিকাংশ্চৈব পেয়ায় নান্যং কঞ্চন বেদময়্যতি বিশ্রব্ধশ্চাত एव मया मत्परायणस्य पोषणपालनप्रीणन लालनम् अनुसूयनानुष्ठेयं शरण्योपेक्षा दोषविदुषा. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji.
Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. May I try, please?
Yes, Mataji.
Aho batayam harina kunak कृपन्न ईश्वर रथाचरण परिभ्रमन् रयेन स्वागन सुहृद बन्धु भये परिवर्जिता शरणं च मोपाशादितो मामेव मातपित्रो भ्रातृज्ञातिन् योधिकं चैवोपेयया नानयम् कञ्चन वेदमय्यति विश्रब्धश्चात् एवमया मत परायणस्य पोषण पालन प्रीणान लालनम् आनसूयु अनुनुष्ठेयेम शरणयोपेक्षा दोष विदुषा. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. So we'll now move to word-to-word translation. Anybody would like to read the word-to-word translation?
May I, Mataji?
Yes, Mataji. Go ahead.
Aho bate, als, I am this. Harine kunakuhu, kunakaha, the deer calf. Kripanna, helpless. Ishvara ratha charan pari brahman. Ranye, by the force of the rotation of the time agent of Supreme Personality of Godhead, which is compared to the wheel of his chariot. Swagana, O king's men, Surit, and friends, Bandhu Bhaya, relatives, Parivarjitaha, deprived of Sharanam, as shelter, Cha, and Ma, me, Upasaditaha, having obtained Mam, me, Eva, alone, Mata, Pitro, father and mother, Bhratri, Gyatin, brothers and kinsmen, Ayo, Thikan, belonging to the herd, Cha, also, Eva, certainly, Upeyaya, having gotten, Na, not, Anyam, anyone else. Kanchan, some person. Ved, it knows. Mayi, in me. Ati, very great. Vishrabdhas, Vishrabdha, having faith. Cha, and Ataha eva, therefore. Maya, by me. Mat parayanasya, of one who is so dependent upon me. Poshan palan parinan lalanam, raising, maintaining, petting, and protecting. An Anashuyuna, who am without any grudge. Anushtayam, to be executed. Sharanya, the one who has taken shelter. Upeksha, of neglecting. Dosa vidusha, who knows the fault. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna. Go to the translation and purport by Srila
Yes,
Prabhupada.
Mataji, I can read.
Ki jai.
Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Okay.
The great King Maharaja Bharata began to think, alas, this helpless young deer, by the force of time, an agent of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, has now lost its relatives and friends and has taken shelter of me. It does not know anyone but me, as I have become its father, mother, brother, and relatives. This deer is thinking in this way, and it is full faith in me. It does not know anyone but me. Therefore, I should not be envious and think that for the deer my own welfare will be destroyed. I should certainly raise, protect, gratify, and fondle it. When it has taken shelter with me, how can I neglect it? Even though the deer is disturbing my spiritual life, I realize that a helpless person who has taken shelter cannot be neglected. That would be a great fault. Thank you, Mataji. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Mataji, can I read the purport?
Yes, Prabhuji. Please go ahead.
Purport by Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. When a person is advanced in spiritual consciousness or Krishna consciousness, he naturally becomes very sympathetic towards all living entities suffering in the material world. Naturally, such an advanced person thinks of the sufferings of the people in general. However, if one does not know of the material suffering to the fallen soul and becomes sympathetic because of its bodily comfort, as in the case of Bharat Maharaj, such sympathy or compassion in the cause of one's downfall, if one is actually sympathetic to fallen, suffering humanity, he should try to elevate people from material consciousness to spiritual consciousness. As far as the deer was concerned, Bharat Maharaj became very sympathetic, but he forgot that it was impossible for him to elevate a deer to spiritual consciousness. Because after all, the deer is but an animal. It was very dangerous for Bharat Maharaj to sacrifice all his regulative principles simply to take care of an animal. The principle enunciated in Bhagavad Gita should be followed. Yam hi na vyathyayanti eta purusha sabha. As far as the material body is concerned, we cannot do anything for anyone. However, by the grace of Krishna, we may rise a person to spiritual consciousness. If we ourselves follow the rules and regulation, if we give up our own spiritual activities and simply become concerned with the bodily comforts of others, we will fall into dangerous position. Hare Krishna Mataji. Thank you.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Wonderful purport. We'll do the invocation. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूप कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरु श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं सागरजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितां तां सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्ण पादान् सहगण ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च हे कृष्णा करुणा सिन्धु दीनबन्धो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कान्ता राधा कान्त नमोऽस्तु ते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धु वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते वेदव्यासप्रिय स्वामीति नामिने नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदांत स्वामीति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे very interesting purport. I know you would have been hearing about Bharat Maharaj and his attachment to the deer from verse 1 to verse 8 till now. So what we have seen is that Bharat Maharaj has gone to Vanaprastha ashram and he carried the deer. When he went to the forest, he saw this deer and he carried this deer in hand out of lot of sympathy for him, compassion for him. So now he thinks that right now the deer is very tender and helpless. He thought that deer is motherless. One should not leave him behind. Because this, he forgets his own spiritual sadhana. So we heard in previous verses, Prabhupada has made a very interesting comment in his purport. He has explained that the spiritual salvation and liberation from material bondage must be worked out with great caution. Otherwise, a little discrepancy will cause one to fall down again into material existence. So by studying the activities of Bharat Maharaj, we can learn the art of becoming completely freed from all material attachment. And that's why this pastime is going to help us grow. So what we understand that even if somebody has spent many years, I won't say the number of years, but many years in decades or more than a decade in Krishna consciousness, still one has to be very alert. One has to be very careful. We see from the example of Dhruv Maharaj, like Dhruv Maharaj was very elevated. Why he got very elevated? Because he had the darshan of the Lord Vishnu himself, eye to eye. So he cannot make any mistake, one may think. But no, even he needs to be very careful. He needs to be very cautious about it. Why? Because we see one example that he had a confrontation against yakshas, and he was about to become driven by rage, anger, and develop hatred for those yakshas. But then who protected Dhruv Maharaj? So now, to understand that when we hate somebody, when we have a lot of grudges against somebody, actually we are not doing any good to ourselves. We need protection when we are in those feelings. Why we need that protection? Because that's not going to help us grow spiritually. So we are going to fall down if we keep such feelings inside us. So in Dhruva Maharaj's case, Swambhuva Manu came to him and he pacified him. He told him it was not at all worthy for him to develop hatred towards yakshas, because then you cannot go to back to Godhead. So that was like a self-compassion. You need some self-compassion for yourself. We need to forgive people. And we don't forgive people for their benefit. We forgive people for our benefit. And that is very, very important. Like there was one example, a recent example I had. Two devotees, they had some argument, and I was trying to console both of them separately. And I mentioned to one person that maybe you can try and forgive that person. I know you are hurt, but you can try and forgive that person, thinking that the other person is going through lots of difficult times in their current life. But the anger was so much, the grudge was so much that the person said, I don't care what happens to that person in the life. they have caused trouble to me, so I'm never going to forgive. And people think that when you are not forgiving, you are actually punishing the other person, or you are doing some sort of justice to yourself. But in fact, from this story, what we have understood, that it is actually the worst thing you can do to yourself by keeping such things. In fact, we should try and resolve that as soon as we can from our mind. So in the case of Bharat Maharaj, we see that he was in a very advanced stages, but he also got distracted. Somehow we have lots of things to get distracted. His distraction was, he got distracted by deer. He left all his distractions. Still he got distracted when he had nothing to get distracted about. When people think, oh, we are going to go alone in forest, what is there for sense gratification? There's nothing that can distract us. But he was distracted because, and he was not protected also when he stopped his spiritual practice. He was not protected because he did not have devotee association. He forgot his sadhana by just looking after deer. So Prabhupada explained that we can be compassionate by raising one from material platform to spiritual platform. Otherwise, any moment, our spiritual advancement may be spoiled and we may fall down. So we need to understand that when we are compassionate, are we also including the compassion towards their spiritual platform? So Bharat Maharaj's compassion for the deer was the beginning of his fall down into the material world. Very important lesson to learn, that it was beginning of his fall down. Why? Because he was not uplifting to the spiritual platform. It was only on a material platform. So what important lesson we understand from this, that in this example, there was a deer, but we will have many deers in our life. And we need to identify who is the deer in our life that is holding us down. So it could be our spouse, could be children, phone, position, money, anything that is stopping us. So how that happens? It is many other things, could be like attraction of a man for woman or woman for a man, gold, silver, land, or some material commodities like car, building, business, money making. All these attractions can be like a falling, trembling block if we ignore our spiritual practices just to get these. So the idea is that we need to keep Krishna in the center. So how Bharat Maharaj's attachment grew so much, how that grew. So we see this AAA philosophy, that little attraction we have, then we tend to give attention. We want to give attention, then we want to give repetitive attention because of that attraction. And then with more and more attraction, more and more attention when we give, we develop attachment, strong attachment for that thing. So there is a verse in Bhagavad Gita which explains this philosophy. It's about Dhyayato Vishwan Pumsa. So I'm sure you all know about this verse. So what that verse explains us, what we learn from this, is that while contemplating the objects of the senses, a person develops attachment for them. And from such attachment, lust develops. So we are coming to the attachment level at the moment. So what we need to understand is how we can use this in a positive way. If we see as an example of a mother and child, we saw as an example of Bharat Maharaj and deer, how that happened. For mother and child, you will see that mother never has to develop attachment for a child. It automatically happens effortlessly. Why it happens? Because mother and child both have attraction towards each other. They give repeated attention to each other. And because of that repetitive attention, mother or child develops attachment for each other. So even if the child is at school, mother will think about the child. It's effortlessly. It's very easy. The child will not go away from the mind. Same thing we can do with Krishna. Same thing with deities. If we repeatedly hear Krishna Katha, we have that positive attraction in us. And then we have the attraction to serve deities. Then our spiritual interaction will increase. And then we will, with repetitive attention. So again and again, doing that service, we are repeating that attention towards Krishna. And then we will develop attachment and reduce that material interactions. So what we will see next is that we understand that Bharat Maharaj developed compassion. But was that real compassion? Is it wrong to have compassion? He got carried away. So what was his thinking, his thought process? Let's understand that. His thought process was he got carried away thinking, oh, this deer is forced by time. He's helpless. He has taken my shelter, totally dependent on me, has full faith in me, and what I should do. So he's thinking if he doesn't take care of the deer, nobody will take care of him, or he can't be taken care by the nature itself. And then he has thoughts about himself. So what instructions he's giving to himself? He's saying, I should be non-envious, selfless, and raise and protect and gratify and fondle the deer. How can I neglect it? And then his thought process is, although I know it is affecting my spiritual life, but what can I do? This duty has come upon me. But this sort of thought is purchasing trouble. Do we have this sort of thought in our life sometimes when we choose something material, or not even if it's something that is taking us away from our spiritual sadhana, where we neglect our spiritual sadhana just to help out of the way. So that makes it misplaced compassion. He didn't understand this because there was no devotee to explain this to him. Therefore, in Krishna consciousness, Prabhupada said that practicing Krishna consciousness alone means you are in hallucination. In Kali Yuga, the Shakti is coming from association of devotees and chanting Krishna's name. Devotees are there to encourage each other. So it is very difficult in Krishna consciousness is to remain alone. Even in those days, Bharat Maharaj was not Kali Yuga time, but he fell down at such an elevated position due to choosing to be alone. So in this age, we can easily get carried away by Maya. So therefore, we should not neglect our sadhana. Sripad Ramanujacharya says, just put yourself in the association of devotees and don't worry about anything else. Just be with devotees. That alone will take care of everything. So that's how it is, the power of somebody who will take care of you, somebody who will tell you what is wrong, what you are doing wrong, what you are doing right. At least that way, we will be on the path of spiritual progress. So now we saw what was misplaced compassion of Bharat Maharaj. He developed great attachment to deer. He was compassionate, and we say that, oh, Vaishnava, who is very elevated, is para dukha dukhi. A Vaishnava is always unhappy to see conditioned soul unhappy. So naturally, it is okay to feel bad about it because Vaishnava is para dukha dukhi. It is a great quality of a Vaishnava. So why is it wrong to have compassion for the deer? So, because Bharat Maharaj, to see the distress of a deer, he got compassion, but his compassion was a misplaced compassion. For that, first we'll try to understand what compassion is. So compassion is a feeling of discomfort by seeing others in distress. We cannot, we feel bad for others when others are in distress. And we have that genuine feeling, that's compassion. Then what we do with that compassion is also important to give it a definition of real compassion. So a Vaishnava compassion is very deep, it's spontaneous, and it's complete. So why it's complete, we will talk about that. So it is deep because even though the Vaishnava would be in a distress, he will still think about the welfare of the other person. spontaneous, would and complete, because they are not only thinking on a material platform, but also on a spiritual plane. So compassion comes in three planes. One is bodily plane, emotional plane, and spiritual plane. And highest degree of compassion is on spiritual plane, which is by giving Krishna consciousness to others. So we see from the example of Bharat Maharaj's pastime, to explain the concept of misplaced compassion, he was showing compassion for deer only on bodily and emotional platform, but not on spiritual plane. He didn't uplift the deer to the spiritual plane, or nor he thought of his own upliftment. So there was no self-compassion. So that compassion become misplaced compassion when you show too much compassion to others, but you just neglect your own spiritual sadhana. So he neglected his own sadhana. He compromised his spiritual life just to protect the deer. So only that became his life's purpose. So that's why it becomes a misplaced compassion. And he, as a result, what happened to him? He was in anxiety. He was in lamentation of separation. And because later on, he got habituated to live in a certain way, that he even ended his life thinking about the deer. So that was the greatest danger he got himself with misplaced compassion. Now we see as another example of Shivananda Sen's compassion. In this story, we see that Shivananda Sen, who was observing one dog in the Harinam Sankirtan. He was going into the Harinam Sankirtan and he noticed one dog. And wherever the devotee went, the dog was going behind. So he took pity on the dog and fed him some prasadam. And dog was very happy coming with him. So one time he had to go somewhere. So he told devotees to take care of the dog and feed him 3 times, just like a Vaishnava, just like devotees. And he said, feed him prasad, just like you will feed any other Vaishnava. But the servant who he gave the instruction, he forgot to feed the dog. So when Shivananda Sen came back and he saw the dog was not fed, he felt very bad. Then he fasted for the whole day, thinking that, the dog was my guest. I didn't take care of him. So I will also fast as a result. So later he arranged for the dog to be taken to the Jagannath Puri, and then dog went ahead of the devotees. And he went in front of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Mahaprabhu was sympathetic towards everyone. So we need to be compassionate towards the animals as well. But what type of compassion? To give them Krishna, to make them closer to Krishna. So Mahaprabhu was sympathetic towards everyone. So he was more sympathetic towards this dog because he loved Shivananda Sen, and Shivananda Sen brought him. So Mahaprabhu sang Lord's holy name, and dog danced in front of him. So this is where we see that the Dasuna Das concept, that the dog was brought by a devotee to Krishna. The Krishna was more pleased because he had recommendation from the another devotee, and he got more love from Krishna. So Mahaprabhu fed him some prasad as well, the coconut pulp. And dog lifted two front legs as we raised hands, and he was dancing, and he left the material world and was taken to Vaikuntha plane. So much of mercy. Prabhupada quotes this example of Shivananda Sen so many times. And he also connected with an animal, we see. But he uplifted the dog to the spiritual platform. So he showed compassion on bodily, emotional, and spiritual plane without neglecting his own spiritual practices. And whereas in the Bharat Maharaj case we saw, he actually degraded himself into a lower platform. So that's why it's very important to understand how to be compassionate. Prabhupada explains in this purport, that as far as the material body is concerned, we cannot do anything for anyone. We cannot do anything for anyone. However, by the grace of Krishna, we may raise a person to spiritual consciousness if we ourselves follow the rules and regulations. So we can give up our own spiritual activities and simply become concerned with the bodily comforts of others. Then we will fall into a dangerous position. So we should never give our spiritual practices, because through our spiritual practices, we become the transparent transmitter. So in fact, we cannot show our compassion to others. We can only represent compassion of Krishna and Guru to others. So by becoming a transparent transmitter, and we cannot become a transparent transmitter if we don't do our own sadhana. So for that, we must receive the mercy through our spiritual practice and then share it with others. And that's how we can represent compassion. So there are some great examples of compassion from Bhagavatam. The first one, very common one, Parikshit Maharaj, that even though he himself was going to die in 7 days, he was inquiring for the benefit of other people's spiritual well-being and wanted to uplift others. But not only uplift others, he also wanted to uplift himself. So it was not that, oh, I want to uplift everybody else, I'm okay. So the compassion includes self-compassion. And for Prahlad Maharaj, he was very compassionate. So for him, his prayer shows that how much compassionate he was. His prayer in Bhagavatam Canto 7, there's one verse, "O best of the great personalities, I am not at all afraid of the material existence. For wherever I stay, I am fully absorbed in thoughts of your glories and activities. My concern is only for the fools and rascals who are making elaborate plans for material happiness and maintaining their families, societies, and countries. I am simply concerned with love for them." So when Lord Narasimhadev asked Prahlad Maharaj to ask for some benediction, he did not provide him any wish list that, oh, I want this, this, this. But he simply prayed to the Lord to deliver his demonic father and all the suffering souls. So this is what we see. And in that, he is not neglecting his own self, because he is going to follow his own spiritual sadhana, but at the same time, he wants to uplift others. We see in the case of Chaitanya Leela, Prahlad Maharaj incarnated as Vasudeva Datta, and he offers similar prayers to Mahaprabhu. In Madhya Leela, verse 15.162 and 163, he's saying, "My Lord, my heart breaks to see the suffering of all the conditioned souls. Therefore, I request you to transfer the karma of their sinful lives upon my head. My dear Lord, let me suffer perpetually in a hellish condition, accepting all the sinful reactions of all living entities. Please finish their diseased material life." So much of compassion. And then we see the compassion of Maharaj Rantidev from Bhagavatam, Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 9 from chapter 21. He is praying that, "I do not pray to the Supreme Personality of Godhead for the 8th perfection of mystic yoga, nor for salvation from the repeated birth and death. I want only to stay among all the living entities and suffer all distresses on their behalf, so they may be freed from suffering." So we can see how these exalted Vaishnavas are ready to suffer on behalf of others. But normally they would not suffer because they are self-realized, they are already very elevated position, so they are not forgetting Krishna, and their suffering is minimized by Krishna because they are controlled directly by Krishna. So normally we don't want or like to suffer distress of our own karma, what to speak of accepting others' karma. But pure devotees of Lord are so compassionate that they are eager to accept suffering on behalf of others for their spiritual upliftment. So Lord and his pure devotees are always concerned about helping the suffering soul. So then another example is of Srila Prabhupada and his compassion. So and other exalted Vaishnavas who is preaching the holy name of all suffering souls are exhibiting the quality of compassion. Out of compassion, Vyasadeva and six Goswami wrote so many scriptures. Out of compassion, Srila Prabhupada left Vrindavan and he went out to preach, took so much of inconveniences just to preach. So out of compassion, spiritual master accept us as their disciples to help us progress in our journey back to home. So we see so much of compassion flowing through all these exalted Vaishnavas. So therefore, what we need to do is we need to be very cautious and not neglect our duty to do our spiritual sadhana. So as per Prabhupada's instruction, we must do our spiritual practice to advance. We must follow the regulative principles. We must study Srila Prabhupada books. So what happens by following all this? When we are chanting, the chanting destroys material desires. It gives us determination and it awakens the sleeping soul. And when we are not chanting, then it gives spiritual weaknesses and it deviates into material ambitions. And by one who follows regulative principles, then we lose our desire for sinful habits. And we get a firm conviction and bhava for Krishna. And by studying scriptures, it gives us knowledge and blissful experience. And then hearing. So we should study and we should also hear from other devotees. So hearing is compared to eating grain and drinking water. Why hearing is so important? Because by hearing, we are also learning the realized experience of the devotees. We learn from others' realizations as well by hearing. So all of these spiritual practices are very important in our life and we must continue them and never think that we are very advanced to stop it at any stage. So I will end this here. If anybody has any question or comments, please let me know.
Hare Krishna, Madhuri, Dharma.
Thank
you for unpacking this very important verse with so many different angles. Just a bit of a query. So there's a very thin line between self-compassion and compassion for others. Like in this case, Bharat was overly trying to be overly compassionate to the deer, and it was a downfall. So what is the demarcation? How can one tell whether we are overdoing our compassion or we're not being compassionate to ourselves? Maybe give some comments.
Okay. So in the case of Bharat Maharaj, what we learn from there, that he was overly compassionate because he forgot his own spiritual sadhana. So in our day-to-day life, we say that we are compassionate to others, we want to bring others into Krishna consciousness. But if one is just thinking about others and somebody calls him that, oh, come for this program, he'll go for different programs. But then if his own chanting is not done, or if his own reading is not done, and they will neglect, okay, that's okay, I will just go and do prachar and nothing else, then that is a misplaced compassion, and it becomes an unbalanced thing, because that person is not nourishing himself first. So self-compassion is that we must understand that we need to do our spiritual sadhana first before we can talk about it or even say to others. But if we just neglect it or say that, okay, I will do lots of other help activities to others, but I will chant at 12 o'clock at night. Once a while is okay if somebody is hospitalized or other things. I mean, we don't have to become very rigid or fanatic. But if that becomes like a habit, that every time the priority for our spiritual sadhana is at a backpack and just going and helping out others and not taking out time for our spiritual sadhana at all, then that is misplaced compassion.
It's nice example. Thank you. We still got few minutes. Anybody want to give their reflection, comments?
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandavat Pranam. Thank you very much for explaining the points very nicely and from different angles about compassion and what should be. I mean, they came to my mind in this day regarding the teachings of Prabhupada. I think everything revolves around the first thing, what Prabhupada has told. Smartabbo shatatam Vishnu, vismartabbo na jatuchit. Anything that distract us from Krishna is not permissible. That is the crux of all the Krishna consciousness. We should always be consider that anything that is heading us towards Krishna, that is our duty, and anything that is distracting us from Krishna is thing we should not do. We should avoid doing that. In other words, we should always remember Krishna. Here in this case, Bharat Maharaj was he was dealing. He was compassionate. But a Vaishnava is never incompassionate, and compassion misplaced is also what I feel. I mean, in my understanding, it is not I feel. What is the teachings I have understood in that way? That compassion is always, a Vaishnava is never incompassionate. He is always compassionate. But he is very right in thinking what is the correct compassion. That means whether he is using his compassion for bringing the person towards Krishna, but unlike other people, they think that showing personal, they think that they are trying to help. They are not, they are considering themselves as the doer. But Vaishnava always think he is not the doer.
Yeah.
Krishna is the doer. So our duty is to bring everybody under the under the service of Krishna. So that is his compassion. As against the material people, he thinks that I am doing something to elevate someone.
Yeah.
That is the Vaishnava's approach and the material person's approach. So here, Bharat Maharaj was negligent while doing his duty. He was going away from Krishna. And you have very nicely pointed out, when we are we're in association with devotees, that helps us always to keep in the right track. Otherwise, there is always chance of slipping down when we are alone. And that happened for Bharat Maharaj. Hare Krishna, that is my realization. Thank you, Mataji, for your very nice class. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Very nicely explained.
There doesn't seem to be any more comments, Mataji, so we'll end here. Thank you. Vancha
Kalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo
Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai.
Ananglata Devi Dasi ki jai.
Jai.
Glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.